Hey, what's going on, guys? Reed here, and I'm back with another tech video. Just a quick note before we start. In this case, this video is going to be another Hackintosh video, except instead of using the bootloader Clover, we are going to be using a more advanced bootloader called OpenCore. So I just want to let you guys know, this is going to be a longer video. For the purpose of this, I'm going to be using the guides provided on GitHub for the laptop guide. And I'm going to be using the Lenovo over here, the Lenovo G5070 for this as usual. And there are some things you're going to need for this. I don't know for sure that you're going to need all of these things. It's just the way I'm doing it. You're going to need a USB. I prefer this is a 64 gig. You probably only need 16. You might also want to have another one on hand that's smaller. This one's a 32 megabyte. Very small, very old, but still works. Because you're going to need to get some files from over there to here. You're also going to want your computer that's going to be a Hackintosh to be running Windows or Linux at the moment. We will wipe it, but you might also want another USB of at least 16 gigs, just so you can create Windows installation media if you need it. Because with macOS and Hackintoshing, disk utility acts very weird with hard drives that are partitioned for Windows. So it won't show up, won't let you format it and stuff. So the way I'm gonna fix it is I'm gonna use a SAT TSV cable, take the hard drive out of that, plug it into the Mac here, format it for macOS, then do it. But basically, you could also create Windows installation media and use that to delete the partition table from it. But anyways, I'm gonna switch over to the Mac now. This is the Mac is probably the longest and hardest part of this process, besides getting it to boot. It should boot from what I've done. It's took me about 15 different attempts to get it working. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and switch over to the Mac. Okay guys, I am back. We are on the Mac. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is go to download Catalina or whatever macOS you're gonna do. If you're doing Catalina, it's probably in the App Store, so we can go ahead and search macOS. macOS. It should be right here. You can press Get. Go ahead and launch. You can download it. Now, this will just run in the background. You can't continue till it's finished, but of course, I'm going to go ahead and let that run in the background while we do some other things. So, for this bootloader, for my guide, we're doing Dortania. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm using the vanilla laptop guide. It says it's a work in progress. Not really. But you really need to know your hardware for this. Very important. Device manager, Google, your friends. I don't really know what that is, but basically, this is definitely like a more advanced Hackintosh. So it won't work all the time. You're going to have to do some Googling and find out issues and maybe do some self-study and learn from others' findings and stuff. But the first thing we're going to do is create the macOS installer. Now, there are two types of installers, recovery image and macOS installer.app. That's what I'm going to be using, which would be a full installer, which has the entire macOS in it, 8 gigabytes plus. Required you have macOS running on something to execute. But basically, and then recovery installers only contain the core essentials to boot, and the rest of macOS is downloaded once you boot it. So we're going to be doing the full macOS installer for this. Recovery installers, haven't really seen those often. It's probably for the older versions. And for our bootloader, we're going to be using OpenCore. So I would download the latest version. Make sure you download the release one. Excuse me. But the release one is different from the bug one, but you want release. So with that done, these are just some features of it. Really, you don't need to worry about that. But we're going to go ahead. This is the folder you're going to be focusing on the most. Right here, EFI OpenCore. All your stuff's going to go in these folders here. You might get a few things from here. Really, you're not even going to touch the utilities folder. But for our USB creation, that is something we should probably do right now. There are two ways you can do this. Right now, you can ignore all this. This is just from Windows. But you can either do MBR or GPT. For GPT, you can go ahead and go into Applications, Utilities, Disk Utility. You can go ahead and go here, press Erase, set it to be macOS Extended Journaled and GUID partition map. But I'm going to be using MBR for this example. So you're going to type disk util list. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull up the command now, considering the fact that I almost forgot it last time I tried recording this. Now you're going to want to make sure that this is set to the disk you want. So in my case, this is disk 2 till it's got the same amount of space. So I'm going to go ahead and type it in, partition disk. Now, and right here you're going to replace /dev/disk2 with yours, but mine is disk 2. Type 2 mbr fat32. Now don't type Clover EFI. Instead, I just type EFI. Type 200 mi HFS plus J. You can leave it as install OS X and type an R. It will go ahead and erase it real quick for you. This only takes a few seconds for me, so we'll be just fine. I see this is still downloading, so we'll get to that in just a minute. But basically, MBR would be two partitions, your EFI one, as seen right here, and then your one with the installer. GPT, however, is not supported with UEFI usually. With Legacy, it has to be MBR. You can do MBR with UEFI also, but it has to be MBR for Legacy. And basically, GPT is one partition with both EFI and with the macOS installer. So basically, I see this is running. I'll probably close this now. Now we're going to install the OpenCore bootloader as our next step once this finishes. So the EFI folder, just like I was talking about, you're going to be using that a lot. We're going to remove some stuff and change a few things around, but really we're not going to be adding much to the EFI OpenCore folder until we've downloaded all that stuff. So let's see, I see the ESB has finished. You can safely close this. This is where our OS X volume will go. This is where you're going to copy the EFI folder for OpenCore, but we're not going to do that yet. So now the populated EFI might look something like this at the end, but we're going to go ahead and do some things to it first. We're going to remove some stuff from drivers. We're just going to remove that, and then we can remove these. Basically, we're going to leave open runtime. That is pretty much the only one we need to keep. And then, yeah, so I think, yeah, open runtime is all we need. Now for tools, remove everything except OpenShell.efi. OpenShell.efi is helpful for when you're debugging and trying to fix issues, troubleshooting, really. This is what it should look like for you. Then your firmware drivers will be in there. We'll deal with that later. SSDTs and DSDTs will be very important. We'll also deal with that later. Now we're going to go to gathering kexts and drivers and get these files. This is an important part. Pretty much everything in this is an important part. You don't want to skip it. This can go ahead and keep downloading. And basically we're going to head to gathering kexts and drivers. You don't need APFS driver loader if you're using the OpenCore 0.5.8 because this is integrated. You need hfsplus.efi. Go ahead and press download. We're going to go ahead, copy. Open runtime should already be there. If you're using Legacy, go ahead and get these drivers too. You're going to put these in the drivers folder in EFI. I'm going to go ahead and drag that in there. Hello. There we go. Then kexts. These will depend on your system, but I always, of course, I recommend you pull up this guide while you're doing this and following my video. My video is more for additional explanation. This guide is really the main part of it. I'm not going to use the Kex repository because those don't have the latest versions. So you need virtual SMC. That is important because macOS requires that to boot, and it will fail to do so otherwise. Now, with virtual SMC, you can put certain ones in here. I'm going to use SMC Battery Manager. I don't have Light Sensor. I'm going to use SMC Processor. I'm not using Super IO and Virtual SMC. You're going to go ahead and copy all these into your EFI. Man, I took the long way on this one, but it doesn't really matter. And you're going to put these in Kex. Man, I'm not gonna do that all the time. I'm just gonna Command C them. Lilu, I think that's what it's called. Lilu. I think it's Lilu. We're gonna go ahead and download that too. It's just the repeated process, really. I'm gonna do it on camera. Just tell you what Kex you need. Now, whatever green is important. SSDT PNLF, remember that? It's only required for laptops, I think. Yeah, only required for laptops and all-in-ones. So, of course, I'm going to be using that because I've got a laptop. Let's just go ahead and do this again. Apple ALC, I'm not going to go with audio. You can if you want. For this one, I'm doing the Realtek Ethernet. Make sure you go to Releases to find precompiled ones. You can go in there. It's under Release. Always remember it to be under Release. You're not going to want to take a Kex from the debug folder. Okay, I've got that one done. You can go ahead and trash these when you're done with them also. USB inject all, not needed on Skylake and newer, but Skylake would be for certain graphics systems and like year ranges. But I'll show a chart on that later, but it's basically, I'm going to need it. I'm using Haswell. Haswell would be like the 4400, 400, or 4000. But, okay, so I see that this is finished. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and quit this. We'll go ahead and create our macOS installer pretty soon. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. You're going to type sudo. You're going to go here. You're going to go into your applications. Go to install macOS Catalina, show package contents. Browse to the resources folder. Drag this into your terminal window. Did I do that right? Okay, hang on. You're going to drag create install media. There we go. And you're going to type volume with 2 minuses. Then you're going to go to folder /volumes. Drag up install OS X. Press enter. It's going to prompt you for your password. Yep, type Y, press return. Now it's going to go ahead and erase it. It will leave this be. This is your EFI. It's not going to touch it. But we're going to go ahead and continue with the Kex now. If you have a non-Apple Broadcom card, only Broadcom, you're going to want this. This is for non-Apple airport cards. I'm going to keep this. I'm going to use this. Usually you're going to put it with a plug-in. Did I already put USB? I think I put USB inject all in here. Oh, I didn't. Okay, I better do that. Make sure you always do it under the releases. Got USB inject all done. Now with this one, you're going to want to pair it with a plugin. Broadcom patch RAM. You're going to want to patch it with, you want to keep it with this, patch RAM 3 for the latest, and you're also going to want this one if you're doing Broadcom patch RAM 3, that's 10.14 plus. Of course, I'm running macOS Catalina, that is the one I'm going to be doing, or Hackintoshing. So I'm going to go ahead and include all 3 of those. Now I still haven't found Wi-Fi to work, so I'm going to use Ethernet for this. But here are some extras. Asus laptops need it, but you should probably try without it first. This is non-Apple NVMe, requires this. Now, this is important. For me, I was unable to get the trackpad or the keyboard working, so I plugged in the external one. You can go ahead and try it. Most systems will work with Voodoo PS2 controller, and you'll pair it with Voodoo input if you're a trackpad user. Some fancier touchpads and proprietary devices require I2C instead. I'm going to be using I2C HID for this one. Actually, let me check my clone. This is why I keep it, to find out. No, I use the LAN. Sorry. I've gotten a LAN touchpad. I just figured I'd use HID, but really it doesn't really matter because it didn't end up working for me regardless. All right, keep you. Go ahead and put these. You see, it's just really the repeated thing, but they're important. Now, where was I? Did I close the window? Well, so with Voodoo I2C, you might need this for an SM BIOS to include the Touch ID sensor. I don't have a Touch ID sensor. My computer's not that fancy, so I'm not going to be using that. And now our text should be set. It should look somewhat like this. Not entirely sure, but I'm going to check my... Since it's a lot to do, I'm going to check this and make sure. So you should have all of these. So it looks like I didn't use these. I kept these. USB inject all. I'm just double checking I got everything right. Don't need this, because I don't want to mess something up and then have the Hackintosh not work. It really depends. Okay, I think I got everything right. Now we're going to do modifying ACPI. This part requires the Windows on your computer that you're going to Hackintosh. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to that. I'll be right back. Okay guys, I am back. We're on the Hackintosh now, or soon to be at least. We're going to do some SSDT and DSTT things. Always remember that DSDT is a decompiled file, a .dsl. And the ones we're actually going to be using in the ACPI folder will be SSDTs, .aml files. So to do this, we're going to go to the easy way. We're going to be using SSDT time for most of this. This won't handle everything, but it will at least help. We're going to go to download this. We can go ahead and open it. I'm going to move this a little closer. But I'm going to go ahead and extract it. I don't know if you have to. I like to, just in case. Now you're going to run this. That. It might prompt you with this, but I'm actually going to run it as an administrator. That's important. It needs to be an administrator. It is safe. Go ahead and it'll ask for that. Now you're going to need Python. I'm not going to install it just because it hasn't really worked when I install it through that way. So I'm just going to go to python.org. Go to this. I'm going to download the latest for Windows. Then I'm just going to do either one of these should work. I'm probably going to do the executable installer. It will go ahead and download. This is important as the scripts use Python. We're going to run it. A few things we need to change here. So we're gonna add that to path, and we're not gonna install the launcher. You don't need the test suite. Leave these. You can install for all users if you want. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and leave that as it is. You'll ask again, go ahead, let it install, and once this works, once it installs, you should be able to use the script. So there's a few things SSDT time can't do. HEDT, this is usually only systems of that type. The laptop EC fix is important. This is the whole reason I had to take 15 attempts on it. SSDT PNLF needs to be configured. GPIO needs to be configured. Although I won't be using GPIO for this guide. There's a few others here. But basically we're going to run that. We're going to do 4 for sure. Option 4. Now let's see if it works now. It'll download IASL. It needs that. We're going to do option 4 first. It's going to dump the DSDT. I'm going to plug in my 32 megabyte USB now, my old one. And we're going to go ahead and just... It's going to put the SSDT in your SSDT temp folder under results. This is your main one we're going to be dealing with. It's the system one. Now we're not putting this in the config.p list in the future. This is already in the firmware of this computer. Well, now we're going to want to do, I think, option 1. But this is mainly needed for laptop users. You can just set the option to C. Go ahead and do that. We're going to do 2 for the EC, except I'm actually not going to use the SSDT EC from here. HPET, we should probably use that. We're going to do plugin type. That's an SSDT we're going to need. Then we should be able to safely quit that. There's now... Just remember that AML files are the ones we're actually going to use. We can close this. We're going to go ahead and put all these files on my little temp drive here. Should have enough space, even for 32 megabytes. These are pretty small files, but they've got a lot of code in them, especially this one here. Go ahead and eject it. And we should be ready to head back to the Mac. So I'm going to go ahead and head right back to the Mac, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay guys, I am back. Now we're going to do some SSDT configuration for some systems. First, we're going to talk about compiling and decompiling. All you really need is Mac IASL. It's actually really easy on Mac to compile and decompile. So I'm going to go ahead and open Mac IASL. Now, press open, because it's trusted. You'll notice it should open the system DSDT. Don't use this. This is the DSDT for your Mac. So now it should associate all the file types with it. Where did my temp drive go? Oh, I haven't plugged it in. But I'm going to go ahead and plug in my temp drive here. Go ahead and get the SSDTs pulled up. So they're right here. This is the one for your system. It's in your firmware. It's just as long and as big as the other one. Don't worry about all this, all these code. We're not have to change all that. But really decompiling or compiling them is saving them as an AML right here. And you can also do command line. There's a Windows version, Linux, but we're going to do some PNLF configuration first. But basically, here's my EFI clone. These are the SSDTs I have. So for PNLF, this is backlight. So we're going to go ahead and head here, download one. For most users, it should be as easy as downloading it and placing it in the ACPI folder. But we're going to double check. I checked on my system. What I did was I went to Device Manager, went to under Display Adapters and my graphics card there, and I went to Details in the Properties window, and I went to BIOS device name. Popped up this. Now for mine is GFX0, so this This should be just fine for me. And so we're going to go ahead and just better double check that. Of course, I'm double checking everything here. I want to make sure I got everything right. Yep. So basically, you can simply copy this into your OpenCore folder. EFI, OpenCore, ACPI is where all these SSDTs are going to go. Now, there are cases where it's called GPU 0 or VID. You can check that in Device Manager, like I said, and change it to that. Now we're going to work to GPIO. In this case, I'm not going to use GPIO. So instead I'm using XOSI. But basically, you can work with this if you want. You won't need XOSI for using GPIO. But really, we're going to head to the EC now. This is one that I really struggled on. But basically, you're going to check in here. You're going to go to Edit, Find. But first, you're going to download one of these decompiled ones. But you don't have to download it because it's in your OpenCore folder. So it's under OpenCore Docs ACPI samples, SSDT EC.DSL. And under your DSDT, you are going to search for PMP0C09. Should be right. Hang on. Go ahead and find it. Now right here, this device, if this says EC, you don't even need EC. You don't even need the SSDT EC if it says EC. I wouldn't change this. Don't rename this at all. Now for scope, basically you're going to look at this and the scope will say, if you're having trouble finding the scope, you can search it here for Intel and then AMD. Now you'll notice under scope, should be right here, it's SB. But basically you're going to want to take SSDT EC and make sure that this is correct. So for me, it should be, according to this, it should be SPCI 0 LPCB. I think I have that right. So I just need to change the LPC. I think I have this right. Hang on. This is my one that I used. So you just want to make sure that that matches, basically. So this is the AML. You're going to want to rename that. You don't rename the EC. You rename the scope to whatever yours ends up being. And make sure it's equivalent to the one for DSDT.AML. So for mine, this should be just fine. I am actually going to just take this one, just for time's sake. Put that in here, ACPI. Just don't skip that. Just double check this guide if you feel like something's wrong. SSDT plug is right here. Usually, you don't need to check anything with that. SSDT plug. Now I don't want to move that. SSDT XOSI. You can use that instead of GPIO. It's down here. Now, we're going to need to change something in the config.p list in order to do that. So make sure you only use this if you really need it. Then SSDT HPET, you can go ahead and check that. I don't think there's really anything you need to do for that. Really, HPET I think is only needed for laptops. But I think that should be it for ACPI. Now, this is the long part. I'm going to put this in a, I'm going to cut out the video for a bit because this depends on your system. But for me, it's Haswell. You see there's a little chart here. It tells you what era and what series. Like, these are graphics, by the way. But basically, for me, it's Haswell. You'll notice this big, scary, long guide comes up Well, we're going to be using this entire thing, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the video. I will be right back. Okay guys, I am back. So I booted the Mac, plugged in keyboard and mouse and everything, and it froze when I tried to erase the hard drive because disk utility acts weird with hard drives partitioned to Windows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug everything here. We're going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to bring it over here where I've got my little tools. I'm going to go ahead and unscrew the stuff and take the hard drive out. Seems like a lengthy process for a small thing, but I tend to do it just to be on the safe side. Let's see here. All right. For me, it's easy because mine has a compartment, this big spot right here, to do certain things like this instead of having to access more advanced components and unscrew like 10 screws. Mine makes it a little easier. Okay, slide this. Now, there might be some more stuff to unscrew, like these. I tend to keep these screws separate from the ones that I use to take this part off. I wouldn't touch anything else in here just because I know my computer has a battery, but motherboard is not accessible anyways. You'll see what I'm doing here. Basically, a SATA-USB cable is a type of cable that enables you to use a hard drive with a computer that's running and run it without it being in a computer. Okay. Let's see, I think it's coming out. So this is all you really need. Now, I'm gonna head over here. I'm gonna bring the keyboard and mouse back. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, got my keyboard and my mouse. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hard drive, plug the end of the SATA USB cable in. Then there should be a little spot in the thick part. Plug in power. Plug this in. You'll notice it will turn on. Set that right there for the time being. Plug the USB into the Mac. And you'll notice it says it's not readable. Uh-oh. That's because it's Windows. So now we need to head into disk utility. And we're going to fix that. You can head here, you can go to erase. Set it to be a GUID partition map with macOS extended, journaled. Now you'll notice it will actually work. It will go ahead and format it. It'll mount it. And you don't want to use it as a backup disk. Don't worry about that. But then you can safely press eject. It will turn it off. Then you unplug the USB. You can take everything off of here. Now this drive is ready to be used with macOS. You can't do this until you've already patched your DSDTs and SSDTs because that requires Windows or Linux, really. Go ahead and insert this back in. I think it goes this way. I'll just go ahead and screw everything back in here. It's a pretty lengthy process just to format a hard drive, but there aren't really, to me, any other better, safer ways to do it. So Okay, almost got this done. Okay, just need to screw in some of the final screws here. Then when we're done with this, we can safely plug it back into power, which I think it still has power because it's a battery, but macOS battery won't work unless you do battery patching, which I'm not going to cover. Really, the only thing I'm going to cover in post-installation is booting from the booting without the USB, as that is an important part. First thing you should do, in my opinion. Okay, we got this. Take this, bring it back over here. Go ahead and get my keyboard and mouse back. I'll set this here for now. Go ahead and plug this in and that. And then I'm getting the keyboard and mouse. All right, we are almost ready to boot this Mac back up. You shouldn't have to worry about the power button thing and it booting normally with it now, because now it's already formatted to macOS and there's no other thing to boot. So I'm just gonna go ahead and should boot OpenCore. Select install macOS Catalina. Wait for all the big text to come on the screen. As usual, nothing different here. And then should be coming. Usually it never fails to, unless you've done something wrong. I like how my face looks kind of weird, like right over in here. But it doesn't really matter. It's probably loading files. If we get to like yeah, there it goes. It tends to go faster when it gets to the next part with the more refined text. But, so it's just gotta wait now. Okay, it looks like it's almost done from the text I see. Let's see. I think it's still going. Now we can actually repeat the steps we did with the keyboard and the mouse. And we can go ahead and the disk should already be formatted. We should be able to go right to install. Plug in the mouse. Plug in the keyboard. Forward. Or I'm English. Okay. Now I'm gonna open Disk Utility and double check that it's formatted the way it needs to be. Probably don't need to, but it shouldn't hurt. You should now see a name on it with whatever you named it. Yep, we're all good. Now you can go here to install macOS. Press continue. Prompt you to set up installation. You can agree to the license agreement. Select on your disk where you installed it. Now this part tends to take some time. It will reboot at one point, and once it does, you're going to want to select your hard drive as the boot device instead of your USB. It will go ahead and technically boot from the USB from your BIOS automatically, because it boots from the USB to bring you to the boot menu to where you can select the install USB. But you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to boot from the USB with your BIOS and then select the hard drive in the menu that appears. So you can go ahead and grab a drink or snack or something like that, because this is going to take a while. So I will be back when this is finished. Okay guys, I am back. We're on the setup screen now. I'm just going to go ahead and select my region. Sets all that for me. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug in Ethernet. For me, I haven't gotten Wi-Fi to work. So, because I don't have a Broadcom card, I'm getting Ethernet right now. Okay, I'll just plug that in. Okay, now I'm going to select Ethernet, of course. Should be able to leave those settings as it is. You can go ahead and just press continue. Don't transfer any information. You can sign in with an Apple ID. For this, I'm going to be doing it. I'm going to just flip this the other direction here. Get two-step verification. I think here, there it is. Okay. Should work. It might not be able to set up iCloud the first time. We'll see. Okay, terms and conditions. You have to agree to these. Create a computer account. Verify that. Not going to include a hint. And make sure that this is correct before you do anything. But I know it's already correct. I've done this many times. Go ahead and set that up. Shouldn't take too long, but we'll see. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up my booting without USB guide here. In the post-install section of the guide, I'm going to link in the description, is where you're going to find the post-install stuff. Not all, most of it's optional. I would say you always want to do booting without USB. I'm going to show that on this guide. But the other stuff's really just the GUI and the boot time, battery, USB, iServices, resolution for both, CMF lock, audio, file vault, stuff like that. And so it's stuff that you can do with this. That will be in the guide I link, but not required. Except for booting without USB. Okay, it's just setting up the account. It might fail. I don't really know. As you can see, touchpad still doesn't work. Probably won't, because apparently the text I use, the one I have to use with this touchpad keyboard, is not really compatible with OpenCore from what I've seen. And so I'm having to use the I2C one that doesn't really, that's not compatible with the touchpad either. Okay. Let's see here. It's still loading. Okay, now you can just press Express Setup. I don't care about sharing crash and usage data. After all, I'm not going to be using this primarily. You can do that. You just do. These all depend on personal preference, really. Yeah. I'm going to do auto. I feel like that's the best one, because it changes depending on your time of day. Okay, we're about to get there. Get ready for the desktop. By the way, in case you're wondering, the depending on what you selected for the SM BIOS, your Mac will show up as either like an iMac or whatever you selected. In this case, I'm using MacBook Pro. But okay, here we are on the desktop. We're gonna need to do some things. I'm gonna go ahead and head to the laptop guide on here because there's a tool I need to download. And we need to be able to boot off without the ESB. We need to do some file copying from the ESB. Basically what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be mounting the EFI partition. See if I can find the guide. Here it is. Pops right up at the top. So I'm gonna head to, this is where you're gonna find the other stuff. I'm only doing booting without ESB. So we're gonna use mount EFI for this. Go ahead and go over here, download that, allow downloads. Then I can it'll go ahead and download. It's a little slow with 8 gigabytes of memory just because it's not a real Mac, but it should still be fast enough to use. As you can see, this is what I mean by moderately slow here. But, okay, I think I clicked something. Hang on. Back. Okay, so we've downloaded Mount EFI. We need to go ahead and run it. So I'm gonna head to downloads, Mount EFI. You might be prompted with the little error message telling you that you can't run it. Usually with this, there's a little setting you have to change to need the password to do it. Yep. And so now we need to open system preferences and do this same old thing that we've been doing for getting it to run scripts that aren't signed. Let's see, I see system preferences is taking its sweet time here. It's in security and privacy. It's only because this is Catalina. This shouldn't be applicable to Mojave or any others. Open anyway, open. Now, you'll get this little terminal window. It's gonna go ahead, we're gonna mount an EFI. I'm gonna select one first. Okay, that doesn't work. Might be untitled. Need to mount that. You're gonna go, if you go through all these, it won't hurt. But now we've mounted it on untitled. This is your hard drive's EFI. Now, what I like to do now, to make this a little easier, because this is not the easiest thing to use, you might unmount it by mistake. Head to disk utility, find the EFI from here, and you can find its mount point. So now we can just go ahead and head to /volumes, and it's right here. So now what you need to do, from the guide I'm seeing on this other computer here, you're gonna wanna take the EFI folder off of here. You're gonna copy it to downloads or wherever. Now, if you see anything in here, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. Just make sure you got this folder. Copy this to your EFI partition. We'll go ahead and copy that. Then the EFI will, for the hard drive, should eject automatically on the next reboot. So we can go ahead and close this. Now you should be able to run it without the ESB now. Copied everything, all the hex, config.plist, everything is just fine. So now, yeah guys, I think that concludes the Hackintosh guide. One little quick note before I go. There are some things you have to do for legacy on this, so make sure you read these guides for anything for legacy. But yeah, I'll link that guide in the description. It is your friend, along with this video. So yeah, everyone, thanks for watching.